So welcome everyone to the September 11th, 2023 Preparing to Bid the Communications and Marketing RFP through Washington State. It's a delight to have such a good group here today. My name is Tiffany Scroggs. Lisa Lagerstrom is here as well, joining me from the APEX Accelerator. And we have a good day planned for you. It should be just an hour-long session. If you haven't done the poll yet, go ahead and close out some browsers so you can find that sucker. It's just a one-question poll. We'll let that go for just a little bit longer, Lisa, and then if you don't mind closing that out.
You bet.
Go ahead and kick us off here. So why are we here today is the top of the agenda. I'll explain a little bit about how this event came to be, and then I'll talk briefly about who we work with. And we'll dive into the solicitation history. We'll review the opportunity. And then we have two tools that we're outlining for you here today. The first is a pre-bid checklist. This is a Word document that was emailed to you prior to today's event. So if you don't mind, that's going to be a bit interactive. So I'm counting on a few of you to have the solicitation open, and we'll walk through the bid checklist, the first part of it anyway, together as a group. And the second tool is the bid or no bid decision matrix that hopefully we'll be able to dive into just a little bit today here as well. So why today? Why did this event happen? We, the APEX Accelerator, seeks to increase government contracts and subcontracts to businesses in Washington State. And we found that sometimes businesses didn't know about a solicitation right when it hit webs, or they weren't aware of the opportunity. And so we wanted to increase awareness of what the state was buying. So this event, while we don't work for Washington Department of Enterprise Services, we're in close communication and in partnership with them to try and get as much of what they have going on as the state buying agency into the hands of small businesses. So that's why we are here today. And we hope that the tools we give you will be helpful. Know that the other thing about today is that it's really geared towards small businesses that may not have done business with the state of Washington before. If you're an old hat, you've been around for a while and you have lots of experience, the tips and tools we give you today may or may not be helpful. So it doesn't hurt our feelings if you take a look at, stay on and see if it's for you or not, but take it or leave it, I guess, is where I'm at with that. So who I am. So I'm Tiffany Scroggs, and I'm the program director of a program called the APEX Accelerator. We used to be called the Washington Procurement Technical Assistance Center, known as PTAC. And we are funded by the U.S. Department of Defense in part. Our job is to increase government contracts and subcontracts to Washington State firms. We have colleagues all around the country. So if you're not in Washington State, at the end of this presentation will be a link to where you could find your local APEX Accelerator. We focus in on serving small, minority, women, veteran-owned businesses in our work. And we have a team of 17 advisors across Washington State, and we typically serve about 1,400 businesses. And those businesses go on to win $300 million in contracts and subcontracts each year. We want to see that number grow, and we want to see all of the firms we work with successful. This is our team map. I saw Maria log in. There might be other APEX Accelerator advisors on the line. But you can kind of find your county on the Washington State map and take a look there. If you're not in Washington State, have no fear. There is an APEX closer to you as well. So let's have a little fun here. So solicitation history. So in Washington State, the Department of Enterprise Services manages what are called statewide contracts. They used to be called master contracts, and they have over 1,500 vendors on those. Those are businesses with an annual spend of close to $2 billion. So this is where a lot of activity happens in terms of who's buying what in state procurement. The state agencies are required to use the master or the statewide contracts, and local governments are encouraged in many cases to use the statewide contracts. And it's typically to buy the commonly purchased goods and services. It's all public information, what's on a statewide contract and who's using those statewide contracts. And we can kind of show you a little bit later where you can find that information. But know that the communications and marketing services solicitation is a new contract for Washington State. So there is no statewide contract history for this particular opportunity. They did issue a request for information in December of 2022. And I'm sure some of you on the line responded to that. They said they got a pretty good response rate, which is fantastic. So maybe you were one of the ones that responded to that and you've been eagerly waiting for Department of Enterprise Services to issue the RFP, and now we are here. This is what the request for information looked like on WEBS. It was underneath those particular commodity codes, which is how the state categorizes what it is they're buying. And you can see the vendors that had downloaded it, and you can see the original questions. If you didn't download it at the time, it has now been archived, but we can pop it over to you as we have a government access that allows us to still see it. I'm not sure how helpful it would be to you, but we'd be happy to share that. So in terms of historical spend, it might be helpful to see who is selling communications and marketing services to the state agencies and how much they're buying. There's a couple of ways to do that. They're all a little bit disconnected because there is no statewide contract with statewide contract data. So a couple of ways to find out if the state agency is buying communications or marketing services is to take a look at your competitors on the open checkbook. So this is a checkbook where essentially who the state government is paying and for what. So it might give like a high level professional services type category, and then it will say so-and-so marketing company, you know, we spent $2,000 with them last month, and you can see that over time for each biennium. The other way to find out what the state is buying and from who is to look in the data.wa.gov. And it's a little bit of a long chain to get there, but essentially you're going into their data catalog and looking at their procurement and contracts data, of which they have several data sets. So you can see everything the state bought on Amazon. You can see what they bought on master contracts or statewide contracts. And you can see what they bought in 2022 through the agency contracts data set. The last way, second to last way is using a WEBS report. So when you're logged into WEBS, and most all of you have a WEBS login, you can hop into the WEBS report and pull based on the organization, so the government agency, the status, whether it's archived or not, and the start and end date. So I just did a keyword of marketing, and it gave me 21 pages of award data for the last 10 years. I could then take this into Excel. There's a little export button next to the save. There's a little save icon on there with the export button. And I could play around with it there. I will warn you now, a lot of this is not relevant to marketing services as you would expect. Even that first one that's listed, the Department of Corrections request for qualifications for a re-entry project facilitator. I'm not sure why the term marketing pulled that up, but there might be some sort of marketing component in the description on the back end, but essentially it's a little bit challenging to find that. You might be better off using the commodity codes that were listed in the RFI or in the current solicitation. Lastly, another way to get information about who the government's buying from and how much they're spending is through a public disclosure request, where you can use that process to find out what the state's buying. And we can talk to you further about that offline. Let's dive into the current opportunity. This is what it looks like in WEBS, and I understand that 95% of you are able to log into WEBS, which is fantastic. WEBS is the authoritative source. That is the only place you want to go to for solicitation documents. Even if I emailed them to you, you do not trust me because I don't work for DES and I'm not an official person within the Department of Enterprise Services. So you want to make sure that you're able to log in, that you're getting emails from the system, and that your commodity codes match the codes of whatever it is you want to bid on. Once you're logged in here, you'll see the customer reference number. That's an important number to note. You'll see the commodity codes. And if you scroll down further, you'll see the vendors that have downloaded it so far. You can kind of assume that the vendors downloaded are at least interested in learning more about the solicitation, if not interested in bidding. Lastly, at the very bottom of that is where you see all the important solicitation documents. So our recommendation is to read and understand them. Note that the original solicitation documents are listed on the left-hand side, and then the amendments will be listed on the right-hand side. And there was an amendment already to this solicitation, and we expect at least the question and answers to be posted later, if not another amendment later on. That's pretty common. So most all state solicitations are organized in this fashion, where it starts off with the competitive solicitation. This is the one I'm hoping you have open so that we can do our interactive exercise in a little bit. And then that competitive solicitation is followed by several exhibits. Exhibit A is kind of just general information about your company. Exhibit B is where it gets really interesting. So you have B1 and B2, and this is where the meat of your proposal documents, the meat of how you're going to craft your proposal response is going to be found. And then Exhibit C is usually the cost, and it is the case in this one, where they want to know the cost of what you charge. And then Exhibit D is what your contract's going to look like if you are successful in winning. And then there's also a business inclusion plan on this one. That's Exhibit E. So that's pretty typical of a statewide contract that's organized in this fashion. And the reason I kind of walk through that is that this long list can feel a little bit overwhelming when you first look at it. You're like, oh my goodness. And you first download all these exhibits and documents into your computer. You kind of want to understand what it is you're looking at here. So overall, let's zoom out a little bit, a picture about what it is we're doing here today. So when you're bidding a government proposal, you first want to read the solicitation documents that everybody gets, right? It's an open solicitation, so everyone's going to be seeing these same documentation documents and exhibits. You want to hone in on the solicitation document as well as Exhibit B. You want to just get right in there and take a look, but ultimately every document in the solicitation is going to be important. Then you're going to decide if you're going to bid or not. And that is a decision to make. And once you make that decision and it's affirmative, like, yep, we're going for it, then you want to organize your approach and assemble and submit your bid. So today we're going to hone in on the first two arrows here. The solicitation documents, we'll get to know those, and then the decision about whether or not to bid. So you were emailed a pre-proposal checklist. This is a tool that the APEX accelerators often give to their businesses they work with to be a tool that you can use. It's in Word, so we want you to make it your own. It's a very generic checklist. It's designed for you to customize based on whether you're going after a federal solicitation or a state solicitation, and based on your industry. All of that will influence how you use this checklist and how you customize it to your own needs. So if you could please indulge me and open up that solicitation document that some of you probably have already found and already read, but help me understand, and we'll fill in this together, how you might use this checklist. So the solicitation review check sheet for solicitation number. What's the solicitation number? That's the first thing we want to fill out.
20422.
Hey, all right. Gold star to Erin. Thank you, Erin, for participating in my little game here. Did anyone find the deadline to submit?
November 1st.
Ding, ding, ding. What time, Maxwell? I don't know either.
Not easily accessible.
I don't know what time they're looking for your responses. That might be a good question for the contract specialist when you go to the pre-bid or during the question and answer period. In federal contracting, if no time is listed, there's a federal acquisition regulation that allows you to assume that it's 2 p.m. and based on the time zone of wherever that buying office is. So I don't know that there's an equivalent state requirement. So we probably want to get clarity from the Department of Enterprise Services as to what time your bid is due, so you don't make the wrong assumption. And Maxwell found that on page 7 of the solicitation doc. So thank you for that. Is there a pre-proposal conference, and when is it?
Yes, it's on the 13th.
Perfect. That's 2 days from now, and it's at 10 a.m. So that's good. It's going to be held virtually. And she found that on solicitation doc page 7. Is there a site visit? So that's a not applicable on this one. In our in the construction industry, a site visit is going to be really important to to being able to bid appropriately. But for this particular one, there's no site visit. And Stacy has a question. Go ahead, Stacy.
I was on Webs earlier and I found the time of when the bids are due.
Oh, hey, thanks, Stacy. When is it?
It actually is on Webs and it says inactive date solicitations will be inactive at 11:59 p.m.
Okay, so that's on the Web's posting itself.
Yes, it's right next to the calendar days of the
Okay.
beginning and end. It has it like at the beginning of the header. It says 11:59 p.m.
Okay, all right. So my question then is the inactive time on Webs the same as the deadline to submit?
When it dies in Webs, that's when the bids cannot be submitted. Yeah, it literally dies at like 11:59 at night.
Okay. Good. We've seen perfect. Okay. So I think we have clarity on that. If not, feel free to ask the contract specialist. But I think you're right in there looking at Webs for that authoritative source on that. Did anyone notice when the pre-proposal inquiry cutoff date is? In the federal side, they're often called PPIs, pre-proposal inquiries. I like to call them question and answers, and so does the state of Washington. So when is the Q&A period cutoff?
October 24th.
Here we go. Yep, so it's open now through October 24th, and she found that on page 7 of the solicitation doc. Take advantage of that time. Get clarity on anything you're unclear on. The solicitation was issued on August 30th. That's also on page 7. This next one, are there reserved awards or preferences for veteran or small business? Are there set-asides? Anyone want to take a stab on this one? It's on page 2. And I'll go ahead and move ahead.
I saw it said something like up to 10 reserved award. Is that
Correct.
what you're talking about?
That is what I'm talking about. Yeah, thank you, Nathan. The reserved awards. So they're going to be splitting the solicitation out so that only small or veteran-owned firms can get a win on those reserved awards. The federal government calls these set-asides. The state calls them reserved awards. And those are for Washington small and Washington veteran-owned businesses. And if you're unclear about whether or not you qualify for that, we're happy to answer questions on that and make sure that your Web's profile accurately reflects that. Moving on, the method of submission here is going to be emailed, unzipped, preferably under 25 megabytes. It says it can accept up to 30, but you just want to give yourself a little bit of a buffer there. That's going to be on page 17. A lot of firms that might be used to electronic bidding or more sophisticated systems will be looking for a spot within Webs to submit, and that is not. The Webs doesn't do that yet. You would want to email your submission there based on the instructions on page 17. So what type of solicitation? This might help your firm decide if you're going to make a bid or no bid decision is how you will be evaluated. And sometimes it's just low price. Sometimes it's based on another factor. Has anyone found the factors for award, how you're going to be evaluated? So I'll let you move ahead to page 12, as well as Exhibit C has some pricing information in there. The non-cost factors are worth a lot more points than cost, which makes sense for a communications and marketing solicitation, in my opinion. But there's a range there based on which category you're proposing under. So you want to hone in on that Non-cost factors, make sure you understand exactly how you will be evaluated. If it's not going to be based on cost, the cost is only 300 points. What's the other points going to be evaluating you under? This type of contract, this is a trick question because I had you open up the solicitation and this answer is found later on in Exhibit D. So you want to hone in on all the exhibits to make sure you're really understanding what it is the solicitation is asking you to provide, and you know what you're getting into. And so in this case, know that your pricing is firm and fixed for at least 1 year. There is, in some categories, it's for 2 years, and there is an economic adjustment range based on the category. So you just want to go to page 4 in Exhibit D and fully understand the price ceiling and the economic adjustment clause. So that's kind of an intro into using a pre-proposal or a pre-bid checklist. I find it really helpful whenever I'm reviewing a new solicitation is to open up my checklist so that I know why I'm reading what I'm reading. It's easy to kind of let your eyes glaze over, especially with that many exhibits, to just read it front to back. It doesn't read like an interesting novel. So you want to kind of hone in on the important critical pieces, get out your highlighter, and kind of start pulling together all the important pieces that will lead you to your bid, no bid decision. So in order to do a bid or no bid, you want to analyze your company's goals, your proficiencies, and your likelihood of success. And this will require you to slow down and read the full solicitation and the subsequent contract. We know that small businesses don't have the luxury of bidding on things they're not likely to win, or you can't bid well. And it also, doing this analysis allows you to think about why you want this work and how you can craft your solicitation to be competitive. So it's important to kind of do this in the beginning so that when you're crafting your narrative, proposal response, or you're crafting your pricing structure, that you're doing it with an eye towards how you'll be competitive. So we've provided you with a bid or no bid self-assessment. And this is again in Word in the hopes that you will fully customize this to your business needs. And it focuses in on questions that allow you to explore whether or not you want to bid, and can you bid, and can you be successful? So the first question on our list just happens to be, is the work within the scope of what you can do? And so if it is, you might rank it a 5. If it's somewhat close, you might rank it a 3, and down the line. How likely is this contract to be awarded and utilized? In government contracting, sometimes agencies have the best intentions of putting firms on an on-call contract or a long-term contract, and then the agency, for whatever reason, doesn't use it. They run out of money. They don't educate their buyers appropriately on the contract existence, and so for whatever reason, it just is it has no result for the business. We can be pretty clear and confident that Department of Enterprise Services wouldn't be issuing a statewide contract if they didn't think there would be at least $1 million in spend. And that's not per category, that's going to be contract wide, but still that's significant opportunity there for a lot of businesses. So usually if it's a statewide contract, the Department of Enterprise Services has done a lot of due diligence, and they have mechanisms in place to ensure that agencies are aware of the contract and are using it. Other agencies might not have that. So if you're bidding to another city, for example, and it's an on-call videographer services type contract, one of the questions you might ask in doing your bid, no bid assessment is, how often do you expect to use this contract, and how are you going to educate all of your various departments and program managers that this contract exists? And kind of puts them in the hot seat to explain to you that there will be a utilization to this contract later on. Cash flow, is it profitable? Do you have time to put in the bid? All of these questions kind of walk you through, and you might consider adding a ton more or subtracting from the ones we give you. Again, it's your tool, make the most of it. You can also play around with the scale. So a 5, you would define what that means for you and your company. So is the work within scope? A 5 is like 100%, is exactly what we do. A 3 is like somewhat. And a 1 would be like, nope, we don't do this, and nor do we want to. So you would score it. And the idea is you add up all the numbers at the end and you set yourself a benchmark. Like if it's over 30, we're going for it. If it's under 30, we're not. And so you can kind of use this as a less emotional and more analytical tool for you to make a bid or no bid decision. So you've seen these arrows before, that you want to read the solicitation documents, decide to bid or not, organize your approach, and assemble the bid and submit. Your APEX Accelerator advisor can help you at any one of these stages. We can review your proposal before you submit and offer a critique. We can just walk you through a bid, no bid decision, whatever kind of area that you think you could be more efficient and effective at. We want to help fill those gaps. You can email us at info@washingtonapex.org and we will route you to an advisor that is best for your needs. Couple tips before I leave you here today, and we go to the Q&A, is to make sure you ask questions and identify any barriers to your participation now. Ideally, you would have done that at the RFI stage, at the request for information stage. There was a recent protest that I'm aware of that the business protested the government and said, your solicitation created a barrier to my participation in the marketplace. And Department of Enterprise Services said, you know what, we're going to toss out your protest because you didn't bring this to our attention sooner. That was one of the reasons. And so the earlier you can get to DES and let them know about any issues with the solicitation, maybe the scoring matrix is flawed, or maybe there's some other barrier, you want to let them know now. The idea is that they want to refine their solicitation so that it's fair and creates a nice competitive process for the taxpayers. Our second tip is to ask for a debrief, regardless of whether or not you're the winner. So a lot of firms win and they never go back and ask for the debrief because they won and they're busy celebrating. But really, every bid you submit to a government agency is an opportunity to learn how you can improve for next time. And speaking of not winning, if you didn't win, you could see if some of the successful firms need subcontractors. You could also target agencies who aren't required to use the statewide contract. That's going to be other jurisdictions that can opt to use the contract or not. Or sometimes the state agencies have a direct buy threshold that they may or may not use the statewide contracts. I think they're technically supposed to use the statewide contracts, but it's not super transparent that they do that all the time. So they might just do a direct award without going to contract. So anyway, we can brainstorm with you some marketing strategies, regardless of whether or not you're on this statewide contract. The fourth tip is to double check that you're Washington in-state small business or that you are eligible for the veteran-owned business certification. The certification in Washington State is very painless and easy. Shamika over at the Washington Department of Veteran Affairs makes it very painless for you, and you can get certified within just a couple of weeks. So go ahead and get that done if you are eligible as a veteran-owned business. Washington APEX Accelerator has lots of events. Please come up to our display table and say hi. We'd love to meet you. There's a regional contracting forum coming up September 20th. There's the North Puget Sound Contracting Conference in Everett. And if you're on the east side of the state, we have the Meet the Bigs conference coming up November 2nd. We will be at all of these with our bright, shiny faces. So please stop by and say hi and meet all the other government agencies that are going to be there as well. I want to thank you for joining us here today. I will open it up to any questions or discussions that you might have. I'm Tiffany Scroggs and Lisa Lagerstrom is here as well. Lisa, did we have any questions come through the chat?
Yes, we did. And would you like to record these?
Sure.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, first question that came in. Do you have any idea how many firms will be chosen per category?
Yeah, so who's got the solicitation doc open? I'm going to stop my share here and toggle around my messy computer here and take a look. So I believe that is going to be listed in the solicitation doc, maybe on page 2. Does anyone have it? Here we go. Let me share my screen again.
Super.
So yeah, so the
They
pre-bid
have up to, right? Up to 15 or up to 10 in that
Right.
first category.
Yeah, and at the pre-bid conference on Wednesday, which we highly recommend you go to, the contract specialist will go through kind of the methodology for the solicitation and how they intend on awarding these. And it's a great opportunity to ask more questions or to type in your question to the email that's provided.
Absolutely. Okay. And we had talked about reserved awards. And if you take the ultimate highest of every one of those categories, I believe there was up to 28 reserved awards if they go up to that top. So that's quite a few opportunities right there for small and veteran, which goes into the next question. Is there a certification process to certify as a small business?
Yeah, so that's another great question for the Department of Enterprise Services. There is when you're registered in WEBS, check your profile. You were asked a question within WEBS that gave you a definition of a small business. And so loosely quoting the revised Code of Washington, if you're under 7 million in revenue and under 50 employees or certified by OMWB, if you hit any of those three, you are considered a Washington small business. So you also have to be in Washington. So check out that RCW when you are in WEBS. Just go to your profile and take a look at that. And if you have any further questions, we can send you the link directly to the RCW and you can do a self-assessment as to whether or not you are considered small.
Okay, excellent. What do you do if a DES representative is not getting back with you?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of times on the DES solicitations, there is a generic email, and I'm pretty sure that's the case on this one, where the email will be like cedartree@des.wa.gov or something like that. And that actually goes to several people on the team with the idea that they never want to leave somebody hanging, especially if there's a question on an active solicitation. So they've built in a way to make sure that there's somebody getting back to you. So number one, use that email. If that's still not working, I would forward your initial email to that email and say, I still have not heard anything, so that the 4 or 5 people on the other end see that their system is not working. And if that doesn't work, I'd go to the small business liaison team within Department of Enterprise Services. They call it the PI team. And especially if you're a small business or a disadvantaged business, the PI team, and I'm forgetting what that means, procurement and
Send the link afterwards. Yeah, I'll send the link to everyone.
It's Kim and Shayna and the team over there. They're designed, their positions are designed to help small businesses navigate state procurement, and they would be happy to, walk down the virtual hallway to their colleagues and be like, hey, what's going on? And if you need further, maybe brainstorming with us, we'd be happy to chat offline and find out what's going on.
Okay, thank you. A question came in about, can we email the questions anytime between 8:30 and 10:24?
Yes, between August 30th and then the end of that Q&A period. You could even email the question afterwards. There's just no guarantee that they'll get back to you. So I was involved in a solicitation recently, and questions were coming in the day it was due, and the solicitation procurement person was active in responding to those the day of. And so always try to get your question answered, but do keep it in with that time period if you need a result back.
All right. A second question upon that is, will the Q&A be shared with everyone?
Yes. So you want to make sure that your question is something that you want shared with everyone, because they usually cut and paste it verbatim into an amendment with their written answer underneath it.
Absolutely. All right. Can you win bids in multiple categories?
A great question for the solicitation itself. I don't want to say yes without finding the actual reference, because then it would just be, well, Tiffany said, and I'm not the authoritative source. So let's read the solicitation and find that answer for you.
All right. Let's see, can we review the difference between reserved and cooperative agreements?
No, I'm not sure I understand that question. Does somebody want to unmute and help me understand further?
If that person wants to,
Yeah,
absolutely.
hi, sure. This comes from page 2, in fact. If we go there, it says cooperative purchase agreements up to 1 and reserved award cooperative purchase agreements. What? Can you
Thank
clarify
you.
that?
Yeah, so great question for the pre-bid on Wednesday, but I'm pretty sure that's referring to the fact that they're inviting Oregon to participate in this. So agencies in Oregon are able to piggyback through what's called a cooperative purchasing agreement. So especially if you're a Southwestern marketing firm or you want to do business in Southwest Washington, that's easy to get over into Portland, for example. That's something to really hone in on, because that's additional opportunity that normally wouldn't be found in a statewide procurement, but this one has a cooperative purchasing element to it. So that's all I'll say for now. But let me know if after the pre-bid that's still unclear, and we can work together to craft a question to the contract specialist.
Thought his question might relate to the reserve part, which you touched on earlier about the veteran-owned businesses.
Small and veteran. So the reserved is small and veteran based on what DES defines, or the RCW defines as small. Who wants to share? I guess a screen to show. Let me see. Do you want me to do it, Tiffany?
Sure.
Share screen. Okay, I'm gonna go into our profile.
Oh,
and
yeah,
we can just do that, right?
we sure can.
Okay. And
Well,
we're going.
Sorry. Yeah. So what she's doing is pulling up her web's profile to take a look at her status as a small or veteran-owned business and the definition of that. And then we can also link to the RCW.
Okay. So within your profile, when you do go in, there's going to be a question here. It's going to say OMWB status, and then you can click here, what's this? And if you're interested, it links to OMWBE and they'll send you information. The second one here, what's veteran status? The same thing applies. You select this, that you're a veteran, and then that engages the veteran administration, and her name is Shamika. She'll be sending you out information about being a veteran. And then you go through that process. So this is one of the reserved pieces, veteran. Now you go drop into small business, and these, what's this, read about it. Because you are going to be asked to self-certify, that's what it says here, as a Washington small business. Completely understand what that is. And you can be a micro, a mini, or a small. And here in parentheses is a very short definition, but definitely jump in here and use this, okay? So this is the piece that's very important in your webs, that it's correct, because they draw on that when they're assuming, you know, I have so many micros, I have so many small, and if you're incorrectly selecting, it's skewing the data. So I wanted to show that visually for folks.
Thanks,
All right.
Lisa.
You bet.
And I put the link to the RCW in the chat.
Excellent. All right, there are a few more questions. The RFP seems like it asks for firms to propose made-up scenarios and costs for the projects. What's the best way to approach this?
That is a good question that I'm not going to touch here today. But the idea is, if you put your feet in the shoes of the contract specialist, they needed a way to evaluate your cost that was apples to apples. And so they came up with a fictional opportunity that you would pretend to bid and your costs associated with that effort. And so I think it's in Appendix C, you'll see those scenarios. And then later in Appendix C, you see your cost proposal based on those scenarios. So their idea is to make sure that they're evaluating you on cost. So you get those 300 points, apples to apples. Beyond that, let's connect you to one of our advisor team and dive in a little bit deeper.
Okay.
And I had,
Another-
oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, no, actually, I'm going to interrupt you. I had a question in the chat directly to me about which email to email DES at, and I'm cutting and pasting directly from the solicitation to everybody, the DES contract strategy at des.wa.gov, and that'll go to the contract specialist, Andrea, and it will also go to a couple of her colleagues, if I'm not mistaken. So go ahead. Thanks, Lisa.
Excellent. Okay. Can we talk a little bit about what is economic adjustment?
Sure. So for that, I'm going to pull open and share my screen on Exhibit D. And the reason I put that in my pre-bid checklist so that we could all explore it is because it's in Exhibit D, and most businesses skip reading Exhibit D until really late in the game, and it could impact your interest in bidding. It could impact your approach to your pricing. You know, if there's no economic adjustment clause and we go through another inflationary event like we just went through, that could be problematic for your profitability long-term. So let me share my screen here. I'm looking right now at Exhibit D, and I did a Control F for economic adjustment, and it highlighted it for me that sections 3.3. So I'm on page 4. And it's based on the category. So for categories 5 and 6, beginning 2 years after the effective date and every year thereafter, it's a 3% increase. Whereas 3.4 for categories 1, 2, and 3, there's a 2% increase. And it goes on. So category 4 is special. That's 1.2. So read it carefully, but you have the web's link, and if you don't, let me know, but you can dive into Exhibit D and really understand how that works.
And that was a tip you threw in there, Tiffany, really fast. You said use Control F.
Yes.
That is a tip.
Control F is our favorite thing. Out of so I'm doing a Control F for at des.wa.gov because I know that's going to be the email, but I could just do the word economic and find it there. So yes, Control F is a wonderful tip.
Because there's many documents to understand. So it's a quick tip. Okay, we have some questions about, can Canadian teams submit, and maybe win bids in webs?
Remember, you don't submit in webs, you submit via email, and there's no prohibition that I'm aware of doing business with Canadian firms.
All right. The next one is for any of the Oregon or Portland, and their Office of Minority and Women Business Enterprise is called ORPIN designations for women, minority, or emerging small businesses carry any corollary weight? Good question for
bring that up because Oregon is a partner in this effort. They there might be a mechanism in there for them to see who is a certified firm in the state of Oregon when they go to buy off the contract. But great question. I don't know.
Okay. Let's see. Cooperative. Okay, on page 5, can we explore more about the cooperative purchasing agreement about reserved awards?
Potentially.
Okay.
What about it? Go ahead and unmute.
That is Stacy.
It was just a reference to additional information.
Okay. Am I on the right page here? You have the agreement and then the sub agreements.
Yeah, there's a paragraph that says in addition, it just says these reserves. It's just kind of saying on Exhibit A1, I believe you can identify the small business, and that helps identify if they fit in that definition of the RCW.
Yep.
I believe.
Okay.
Yep. So yes. And if there's more questions about how to fill out the Exhibit A1, which is the bidder's certification, those are excellent questions to bring up now to the contract specialist.
And Nathan asked, does this also mean Oregon companies are eligible to bid? Absolutely.
Come on in.
For sure. Is there a not safe time to ask questions?
So a safe time implies that there's a dangerous time.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know about that, but certainly once the solicitation's open and on the street, as it is right now, the contracts team at the government agency has to go a bit careful. They have to go a bit quiet and have to be very formal with how they answer your questions. Prior to this solicitation hitting the street, maybe in early August, you might have been able to call up Andrea and have a chit chat about the RFI and about her plans to issue the RFP, the request for proposal. But now that it's out, she has to be super careful that she doesn't give an undue advantage to any of the bidders on the line. So even if you ran into her at the grocery store, she really wouldn't be able to talk to you about this. It would be improper. So save time to ask questions. If you have a question that will influence your ability to bid correctly, get it answered. And if you're worried about your competitors seeing your question, then maybe brainstorm with an accelerator about the best way to phrase it. Our advisors are pretty savvy with that. We might have some ideas on how to phrase it to where you're not giving away any competitive intellectual property or anything like that through your question, but you still get it answered. But right now it's we got to be fair, right? So DES is looking to be super fair by publishing all the questions that come in.
All right. I have one more question. Oh, here comes another one. Okay, excellent. It's a comment and a question. From what I've heard, the state usually awards to firms who already have experience doing work with state agencies. Is that your understanding? How would we overcome that hurdle?
So there is the non-cost factors are 750 for categories 2, 3, 5, and 6, and 910 for categories 1 and 4. That's 910 points out of 1,260. So they really want non-cost factors to be a critical part of your evaluation. So then, to answer your question more directly, we would want to pull open that non-cost factor, which is in Exhibit B2, and take a look at what they're scoring you on. Keep in mind, this is a new solicitation, but so there's not really an inherent incumbent, but you do have businesses that have been successfully selling to state agencies, marketing and communication services. So your job is to, if you're not one of those, to really tout how great you can do against the evaluation factors in B2. That's the best I can answer right now. Incumbents, I mean, yeah, the incumbents typically understand the customer better. They typically know how to respond to a solicitation better because they've done it before. And so there is that inherent incumbent success rate that happens in government contracting. But the idea that DES is trying to do is make it as fair as possible to get the very best service provided to the state and on behalf of our taxpayer dollars. So I don't know, it's kind of a safe answer, but we can talk further offline.
Absolutely. And Nicole had mentioned subcontracting with a larger agency who's procured before is a good way to get in. Definitely that's a strategy, understanding who's been out there doing this, as Tiffany just said. I have a question here. It is, for newer business taking a larger contract like this, what's the best way to actually set your bid and costs?
Yeah, the first thought I had is know your cost of doing business. You have to know your cost of being in business before you can effectively bid a scenario as required by this solicitation. So if you're not sure of your overhead, or how much it actually costs you a fully burdened rate, then, and those terms give you anxiety, you might want to try and reach out to one of our other resource partners that focuses in on business planning. There's a lot out there. The Small Business Development Center or Business Impact Northwest have a lot of advisors that can help you with your budget and your cash flow projections and all of that. So you can ensure that you know your cost of doing business and you don't underbid, and that you can kind of build your cost from there, right? So I don't know if that answered the question. There's no correct way to build in your cost factors, but there's a lot of best practices out there for you.
And just to add on to that, I am making a list of links to send to you after. And Business Impact Northwest is a very great organization to help you with that, and Small Business Development Center. So we will send you those 2 links for sure. Okay. Oh, somebody, Marty, said this. How many of you, oh, that's a silly question because you can't talk to me. I mean, okay, so in webs, there is a place, and I am going to go out there to show you because this is a great strategy. It'll take me a moment to go out there, but let's share so you can see the journey where I go and why I'm doing what I'm doing. Okay, so for all of you that have a webs profile, you're going to go in, you're going to say, I'm going to search for some opportunities, and I happen to know the solicitation number, so I'm going to put it in. And it's going to pop up all the documents that I need to know about communication and marketing services. So I'm going to open it up a little further. Then I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to find this right here. This is pretty powerful. It says vendors downloading. This is showing everybody that has at least looked at this. Now, this is a huge list. Massive list. It goes and goes and goes. 4 pages. I'm just going to show you the last person. It's alphabetical. And the strategy is to look at these folks and understand who they are. And if you know that they're big players, maybe you are a subcontractor for them. But you're reaching out and asking them, are they going after it? And having those type of conversations. That is one way to, as a new business, start to get familiar with what's going on in this arena. So somebody had said that's a great way to do it, and I absolutely agree. Looking at who's out there, and all of you. I mean, there's I think 90 of you here today. So knowing who is out there is a great way to build relationships in this pursuit. I think I have one more question, and I'm going to. It's okay. We don't seem to be able to change our OMWB status in woman-owned. And just so you know, OMWBE is our certifying body for small businesses for the state of Washington. But we didn't talk about them because in this solicitation, small business is based on what the state agency is saying within WEBS. So I want you to all know that small within WEBS is how they're evaluating you. To just understand that, right?
Yes. So the question though was they can't change their status in the web system.
Right.
Okay.
Oh no, OMWBE.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to say that OMWBE is different than WEBS.
Correct.
Totally too. And I want everybody to understand that. It's pretty important you understand. So WEBS, and that's why I showed you the screen. Those 3 are the choices. I'm small, I'm micro, I'm mini. And you're checking a button after you've read and attest to. OMWB is a certifying body for minority business enterprise, women business enterprise, small business enterprise, disadvantaged business enterprise, a number of certifications. Totally 2 different things.
Yep. But then how do we add the women-owned status within that though? Because it doesn't give us that option.
in OMWBE, if you went out to OMWBE, you work with that agency to change your status. And it's a process, it's an application process that you go through and you provide a number of documents.
We're currently certified with that, but what I'm saying, what our question was, is on here it says OMWBE status, learn more about the certification. Does Webb's not care if we're a woman-owned business or not? Because it looks like it asks us what our percentage of women-owned is, and we're 100% women-owned. So
Okay.
with that said, is there no place on Webb's to say, to put your certification number for OMWBE to show that you are actually certified woman-owned business?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. There should be a connection point there. Let's brainstorm with you offline, but there's also, I put in the DES Web's customer service. Joe is fantastic, and you can call
Yes.
him your Web's
Yeah.
question. But let me try and find the answer before you log off to them.
Okay,
Yeah. Perfect. Great question.
thank you.
All right. And exhibit 1A, check for OMWBE.
Is any other
I would
questions?
also love the answer to that one as well, because I'm trying to figure that out.
Us as well, please.
Well, I'm putting that on the list if we don't get it before 3 o'clock. Okay, super. I think we have asked and answered all the questions. If I've missed one, please unmute and ask. That would be great.
Thank you all for coming today. Going once.
Going twice.
Alrighty, if there's any APEX accelerators on the line that know the answer about how you make your OMWB status show up on your Web's profile, stay on the line with us. And
Well,
the rest of you, go ahead, Lisa.
I was going to say, well, there is a connection, meaning when they are certified, then that is reported back into Web's. And when you are listed, you personally don't get to say I am woman business enterprise or minority business enterprise. It is that certification process that comes back into Web's. They are connected in that way.
And if they fail that connection, though, how do they fix that? Is it an OMWB issue? Or
OMWBE. But again, I think you gave a great resource, Joe, as well. For anything is Web's.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa.